you everyone. Thank you everyone for joining us today on this important discussion, learning event, exploring the Global Family Resource Center concept and its relevance in India context. Before further ado, I just wanted to give you some brief housekeeping announcement before we begin. Please ensure your mics are off and remain mute while the session is in progress. And it would be wonderful if you can keep your videos on so that we have a more interactive session. If you have any comments, questions, or reflection on the content being shared, please feel free to post them in the chat box. We will address them either at the end of the session or will take them during the open discussion. Further, in compliance to our child safeguarding policy, we request everyone to maintain the privacy and confidentiality of children and families when narrating case stories or anecdotes. Please refrain from sharing any details that might disclose their identity. And our speakers, our moderators, and everyone will also take care of this thing. As we know, the objective of today's event, as is suggested in the title, is to explore the Global Family Resource Center concept and examine whether it can be a relevant context in the Indian context or not. We all know families, even the stakeholders who work with children, who work with families, including the government, are increasingly realizing that families are the cornerstone of a child's well-being. Yet families face rapidly changing socioeconomic and emotional changes, from balancing work, caregiving responsibilities to navigating digital transitions to coping with migration, poverty, health crisis. In our own work, we have seen that supporting children in isolation is not enough. Intervention focused solely on child amount to only half a service unless the family itself is supported and empowered with necessary emotional, social, and financial resources. Preventing family separation and reinstitutionalization requires that families are equipped with services they need to ensure children can continue to live in a safe, nurturing environment and grow with love and care. At IACN also, we have long been engaging with stakeholders at multiple levels to promote family-based care. One recurring question has been, once the children are restored to their families, what kind of ongoing support do children and families need? We all agree that simply sending children back to families is not enough. Without adequate support, there is a real risk of reinstitutionalization. We have seen cases where children are back to institutions or they are also being dropped off from their school, face neglect, families are suffering. And in such incidences, we also have come across cases of physical, sexual, or other kinds of violence against or abuse against the children. These are very real challenges that many organizations who are continuing to grapple with and also who are working with children often ask this question. We are sending children back to the families, but how we ensure that the children are not further feeling traumatized or the families are feeling helpless to raise their own children. The underlying principle, what we believe, is that families need to be strengthened. Unless they are strengthened, children will not be safe within the family environment and will not be able to grow to their highest potential. And when families are strengthened, children become more resilient and prosper also. In this context, we were delighted to have Mr. Andrew Russo with us today. He will share the global perspective on family resource centers and help us reflect on whether these approaches could be one of the solutions for supporting children and families after restoration. We are also fortunate to learn from Ms. Bhavani Pillai, who will present an example of family resource center in Singapore. Turning to the Indian context, in my opinion, the need for such community based family support structures is deeply relevant. India has extraordinary family strength, intergeneration bonding, caregiving traditions, and cultural resilience. Yet we also face mounting pressures of mental health issues, domestic violence, challenges faced by single parents, and persons with disability. Even the government, we all know, even the government with Mission Vatsalya, with National Rural Health Missions and one-stop centers for women have created important safety nets. However, these remains a significant gap in integrating these resources into one accessible family-centric platform. So I think here the family resource center concept can be very, very important and critical for India. And today we would like to discover more about it. We would like to explore more about it, how this concept can be relevant into the India's social, cultural, and economic context. And can these services, what kind of a services needs to be provided to family so that we ensure that all the families are empowered, participatory, and and have their own dignities. With these thoughts, I warmly invite our distinguished speaker, Mr. Andrew Russo, to walk us through the Family Resource Center. Over to you, Andrew.
Well, thank you so much for that kind introduction, Dr. Magnani. Thank you so much to the Indian Alternative Care Network for this opportunity to connect with you all virtually. Thank you also to Ranjana at Udayan and Sandhya at Miracle, who helped to plan this session. And especially thanks to Bhavani from Singapore, who is actually joining us from Australia, where she's at another conference this week. So we're actually joining you from three continents today to make this happen. And very grateful for all of you being here, taking time out of your busy schedules, as I know you're all extremely hardworking people trying to improve the landscape for children and families. Okay, so as mentioned, we're going to be exploring the Global Family Resource and its relevance for the Indian context. And for a brief word of introduction, the International Association of Family Support Networks that I'm the co-founder of is made up of different countries that actually have networks of the particular kind of program we're going to talk about today, Family Resource Centers. And they all come together to learn and share from each other. So our mission is to promote international cooperation, exchange, and best practice in the family support field to support children, families, and communities to thrive. And our vision is a world in which every child, family, and community is thriving. And want to get a sense of who is in the virtual room here as we before we go any further. So I'm going to launch a series of poll questions here to ask for your help to identify who is here with us. And second here, going to the first poll. So based on this map, I'm going to ask you to take a look at which region you're joining us from. And if you could indicate that in the poll, that would be great. All right, so I'm going to take a look at this here. So very exciting. We have people joining us from all across the subcontinent here, at least one person from every region. That's very impressive. I myself have had the pleasure of visiting your country many, many times on a personal level. And I've been to 5 of these 6 regions so far. So I'm looking forward to more explorations in the future. I'll say more about that later. And now going to our next poll here, which is asking your affiliation. Hope you see that in your middle of your screen there. How you might identify your affiliation, whether you're representing government or NGO, philanthropy, education, whether you're a consultant or other. If you selected other, which I see several people have done, if you could share your affiliation in the chat, that would be great so we can recognize and welcome you. All right, a few more seconds for this poll in the middle of your screen about affiliation. All right, stop it there and share it. So we see that the vast majority of people joining us today represent NGOs. So welcome, welcome to, I'm sure, some of the hardest working people in all of India. And we also have someone here from government and several consultants and some other that I hope will introduce themselves in the chat. And let's go on to our third poll here. Oh, just stop sharing this one. Okay, one more for you for now. Okay, this question is what level you're working at, whether you're working at the policy or systems level, management level, program direct service level, or other. And again, if you select other, if you could indicate what other is in the chat, that would be great. Okay, a few more seconds with the poll. Okay, great. Let's take a look. So we see once again, we have people joining us from all levels, policy and systems, management, program direct service level, and also others. And great to see this diversity here, both from around the country and with people representing different kinds of organizations and stakeholders, and also with different levels of responsibility that you have. So this is really great that will enrich our learning and sharing together, which is how we see this session as an opportunity for us to connect and learn from each other. So in terms of sharing a little bit more about my background. As mentioned, I've had the pleasure of visiting India quite a number of times, as far north as Delhi and Darjeeling, as far east as Kolkata, as far west as Udaipur and Mumbai, as far south as Madurai and Kerala. So I've had the chance to visit many places, and wherever I visited, not only have I found amazing history and wonderful people and incredibly rich culture and history to learn about, but also amazing food. So I'm a huge fan of Indian food. It's one of my favorite cuisines. And I'm going to ask you one more question, which is to type in the chat what your favorite dish that you would recommend from your state, for your hometown or your city, in the chat. So I'd love to know what you would recommend as the best dish that someone visiting must try, so that we'll have a list there captured for future visits. And I'll share that wherever I've gone, as mentioned, from dining at the original Indian accent in Delhi and meeting the famous chef there, to having dal and roti at a roadside stall that was incredible, to trying tea leaf pakora in Kannur, to chicken chetnad sandwich I had at a cafe in Mumbai that I still dream about. And my absolute favorite Indian food of all is one of the most seemingly simple, but actually very complex and layered dishes, which is sambar. So sambar is my absolute, whether with uh, whether with dosa or uttapam or just on its own. I'm happy with just a big bowl of um, uh, Samarna, and that's all I need. Welcome you to share about your experiences with great food that you would recommend from your states, cities, and towns. At, and then we'll turn to our presentation here. So we're talking about family resource centers, and again, hope that this information will be of use within the context of the work that you're doing. So it's very impressive, all the work that has been done by many of you and other stakeholders over the years in India already, with looking at deinstitutionalization, care reforms, and the many, many, many shifts in systems and practice, seismic shifts and change that need to happen to make big goals and like that come to life. So applaud and admire the work that you're doing, from the Juvenile Justice Act to the Mission Vatsala, and just a couple of weeks ago, the recently released Strengthening Families in India framework and guidance. And all of that lays a great groundwork for the conversation that we're having today about family resource centers, which fit within primarily the primary prevention, universal services for family strengthening that are called for in that recent framework and guidance. So family resource centers have emerged organically around the world, and they may be located in community settings, like the image you see on the left in Ireland, or they may be in schools, like the image you see on the right in Kentucky in the United States. They may be in rural settings, like the image you see on the left in California, or they may be in urban settings, like the image you see on the right in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. They may work with specific populations, like the image you see on the left, which is working with Indigenous and Native communities in Canada, Prince Edward Island, or they may be serving the general population within a given area, like the image you see on the right. It's from a center in Hong Kong. But wherever they are, family resource centers work with a particular kind of approach. And that approach is family centered. So families are at the center of all that we do. They are multi-generational. So working not only with the child, parents, caregivers, grandparents, aunts and uncles, whoever the people important in the life of a child may be, to ensure that that whole family is supported in raising that child well. They are strengths based, so we see as coming to the table with strengths that we want to support them to further develop and build upon. And they come from a community development perspective. So the centers don't see themselves simply as social service providers, they see themselves as community builders. They believe that their work makes a fundamental difference in terms of strengthening communities by ensuring that families thrive. They are designed for all families. So not only for low-income families or families facing a lot of challenges or families connected with the child welfare, they're for all families. The image you see on the left comes from New Jersey. New Jersey, the state of New Jersey in the US, has 21 counties and 57 family success centers. That's what they call family resource centers there. So every county has at least one, and typically more than one, family success center. And that includes highly affluent counties as well as highly challenged counties as well. Because the concept is that all of us, all of us could use support with two of the most important roles we can have as adults. Two of the most important roles being a parent, being a spouse or partner. Two of the most important roles we can have that typically we receive nothing in the way of support for. So here are these centers to help ensure that all of us succeed. And the fact that they're available and accessible for all goes a long way to reducing stigma for people accessing these supports. That we think of them as a basic building block of a healthy community. So just like every community should have a good school and a library or a park, a family resource center, again, a building block of a healthy community. They provide services that are no cost or low cost for participants and support families to build protective factors. So, protective factors such as these, which are based on research that was conducted in 2005, that was done looking at if there were certain factors, if when present, were more likely to indicate a family was healthy and strong, less likely to experience child abuse and neglect. And with that research, they were able to boil it down to five particular factors, if when present, indicated that. So, as long as we're going to be working with families, we want to be supporting them to build these protective factors because we know based on research, they make a difference. And these are the factors that family resource centers focus on building with families, such as parental resilience. Parental resilience is the ability to weather the storms and challenges of life, for example. The family resource centers are low cost programs, so these are not expensive programs to put together. For example, school-based FRC, you don't need to build a building, you just need to find a sympathetic principal who gives you room, you add in staff, and you're off and running with having a center. They are readily replicated. These centers can work across different communities, work with different populations, highly adaptable as well to different contexts. The image you see on the left comes from San Francisco, California. That's actually the last family resource center I directed, which I'll say a little bit more about. The image on the right comes from Yokohama, Japan, from a center that I visited there a few months ago. So totally different parts of the world and all doing the same work, although working with different populations. There are centers that specialize in working with homeless families or families of children with disabilities. In California, for example, there's an entire network of 58 centers specifically working with families of children with disabilities. Every county has one of those centers. And they have successful outcomes as demonstrated through multiple external evaluations. And I'll share more about that in a little bit. And they're popular with families, which is a big selling point. Um, and family resource centers bring together multiple services and supports that may be familiar to you in a convenient hub, such as parenting education, health screenings, childcare resource and referral, play groups, home visiting, fatherhood programs, family counseling, diaper banks, toy lending libraries, job skills training, lots of different kinds of supports and services. Not all family resource centers will have all of these kinds of services, but this is an example that gives you that idea that it's a convenient hub or one stop where families can access these supports in these centers, which are typically run by NGOs or schools. Family resource centers are of, by, and for the communities served. And this is a really important concept when we think about these kinds of programs. So we don't just plunk down a center in a neighborhood and hope that families come to it. We actually start by going out to listen and learn from the families about what are their strengths, what challenges are they facing, what are their interests, what are their stresses as parents. And then we design the supports and services to be responsive and reflective of that. So the image you see on the left comes from San Francisco, where a community needs assessment is taking place. Then the staff are hired from the community served, so they look like the family served, speak the same languages, have the same lived experience and cultural backgrounds. That goes a long way to building the authenticity and trust of the programs with the community. And they're guided on an ongoing basis by parent advisory committees. So participants in the program serve in leadership roles, helping to ensure that the programs continue to execute their missions effectively and being responsive to the community. We often say if you've seen one family resource center, you've seen one family resource center, because as I just mentioned, because they're so responsive to the community, communities are different. So exactly what one community may need will be different than what the services and supports might be in another community. So like I would describe it in this context as something like biryani. So biryani is available all over India, but there are so many amazing variations on the theme. And they all have some basic core elements, but also variations based on local cultures and taste and customs and such. So similarly with family resource centers, incredible variation, but also we know that there are four most common areas of service based on research. And the two big ones are parenting support and access to resources. So these are the bread and butter of any family resource center, big, small, urban, rural, population specific, general population, all of them provide parenting support and access to resources. Those are the core two services. And both of them exist on continuums from lighter touch to more intensive services. So, for example, with parenting support, that might start at a lighter touch end with parenting workshops on topics that may be of interest to parents, such as sibling relations or positive discipline. And then going further, you'd see parenting support groups and parenting education series, typically using evidence-based curricula. And home visiting is also commonly connected with family resource centers, basing the home visitors at the centers that then go out to the families and also connect the families up to the center. Access to resources also exists along a continuum from lighter touch to more intense services, starting with what we call enhanced information referral. So that's making connects and the warm handoff of families to ensure that they get to the supports and services they're looking for. Concrete supports, that's when the center can directly provide supports, such as a diaper bank, for example, or clothing bank that families can donate and pick up used clothing from. Working with families over time to address family identified goals. In the past, that used to be called case management. We don't call it that anymore because we don't see families as cases to be managed, but family development work. And then also and then also when other resources are co-located at the site to make it easy to access. So for example, there are centers that, again, they're run by nonprofits, but there may be a government worker who's outstationed there a certain number of days or hours a week, for example, to help families sign up for a certain kind of program or scheme. So that makes it very convenient for families that they can find these resources all in one place in their community. Also, most common areas of service include child-focused activities supporting their healthy development and parent leadership development, such as those parent advisory committees that I referenced earlier. It's really important to understand that family resource centers are not just a list of services, however. So it's very different than, for example, the dentist. You go to the dentist and then you hope you don't have to go back for maybe 6 months. Now, family resource centers are totally different. You don't go and access a service and that's it. When you participate in a family resource center, that's the word I use, participate. You participate, you join a community. You join a community of other parents and caregivers who look like you or may not look like you, but are also experiencing the joys and challenges of raising children and support each other. So this is a huge piece of why these programs are successful, why these programs are popular with families, is because they build peer support. So parents connect with others, form friendships, social connections. We know, based on research, that social isolation is highly correlated with parental stress and therefore the likelihood of child abuse. So anything we can do to reduce that parental stress is going to help with reducing child abuse. And family resource centers squarely make a difference in that area with the work that they do and this peer support and social connections. These images come from Canada and Japan. And you've heard me talk about family resource centers. Want to give you an example of a parent sharing her experience. This is a parent who is an immigrant from Africa in rural upstate New York in the US, sharing her experience going to a family resource center in her community.
People underestimate how challenging it can be of trying to balance parenting and effective parenting, mind you, and not having a space to actually vent and communicate and learn alternate ways of rearing their children. People don't realize it is a support that they need, not once in a while, but like all the time. I could see the excitement, the smiles. It is the same every single time they walk in the door. The staff is so friendly, the place is so inviting. So it gives us an opportunity to just like kind of brush off life and then escape into this space where they could just relax. And it nourishes us, it feeds us, and allows us to just make, take all of that and positive energy and do life, regardless of anyone's socioeconomic status, regardless of racial background, educational level. The need is exactly the same. It is a place, a need for a place to be able to sit down with other parents and do life together. And that is something that is so impactful. Once they have that support system in place, it has a ripple effect. And we will glean from that because our communities will thrive. The more support, I mean, it's just, it's like a domino effect.
All right. So now that you've heard about family resource centers, I have one more poll question for you, which I'm going to launch right now, which is based on what we've talked about with family resource centers, these welcoming, non-stigmatized hubs that families can voluntarily go to for support. Want to ask, have you seen programs that might be family resource centers somewhere in India? And if so, answer the poll here. And then also, please share in the chat what program you know of that you think may be an FRC. And that will also be helpful to us as we continue to explore the Indian landscape and context. Okay, so sharing the results here, we find that most people have not seen such a program, but quite a number have. I think they've seen a program that looks like an FRC, so great. Please share more information about it in the chat, and we'll be happy to follow up and learn more. And then I'm just going to finish up with a couple more things. I'm not going to go over this in great detail, but I just want you to know it's there. Is that this is a continuum that shows how family resource centers work with families across the continuum of potential involvement in the child protection or child welfare system, as it's called in different countries. This chart was developed by This chart was developed by the US network, and it starts with primary prevention. So that's supporting families to build those 5 protective factors that I talked about earlier, providing those supports and services. Then the next column is differential response, and that's when a family is known to child protection and then referred to the center for support. That's another way families may access the center. Then third category is open child welfare case. So when there is actually an open case, and then how the FRC works in partnership with the child protection staff and from both sides try to work together to support that family to succeed. And then finally, the last is a reunification, when ideally the family is reunified, and then child protection's role is over, and then the Family Resource Center provides aftercare, wraparound support for that family. So I want to touch on referenced earlier about family resource centers, and we're very fortunate that quite a lot has been done. And I'm just sharing some highlights here. You can find the research reports and others on the International Association website. There's a whole page for that, specifically Family Resource Center research. This first piece of data comes from the state of Alabama in the US, that they did a social return on investment study that showed for every dollar invested, that the state received $4.93 in immediate and long-term consequential financial benefits. So basically a 1-to-5 ratio. Also, research done in Pennsylvania showed that neighborhoods that had family resource centers had a 26% lower rate of child abuse and neglect investigations. And that only makes sense, right? That if we support families to be healthy and strong up front, the less likely we are to see them in the child protection system later. And then this is my favorite piece of data to share, which comes from a semi-rural county in Colorado called Teller County. And Teller County has their child protection system, the county runs. And in the past, when they would get calls to child protection, the child protection would handle those calls, and they would screen in families that needed support, and they would screen out those who they didn't rise to the level where they were going to open a case. And starting in 2016, they tried something different. So they would screen in the families who needed the support of child protection, but when they screened out, they pointed the families to the Family Resource Center. So they made a referral to the Family Resource Center. And just by doing that, just by pointing families in the direction of the Family Resource Center, they saw a 63% drop in the child maltreatment rate. 63% drop. So they more than halved the number of children entering into the child welfare system just by pointing families to the FRC on a voluntary basis if they wanted to go. And if we understand family resource centers, this actually isn't magic at all. This makes sense based on 2 things. One is that the majority of calls in many countries to child protection are not actually about physical abuse, but typically are for perceived neglect. So neglect, the withholding of resources from children. But typically most families are not intentionally withholding those resources. They don't have those resources to begin with. But along comes a little program called a Family Resource Center. The whole point is helping to connect families with the supports that will help them to succeed. So getting those supports, such as food or access to housing or clothing, etc., then they're not going to end up in the child protection system. And similarly, all the work of those family resource centers to support parenting and increase social connections, as we talked about earlier, that's also going to decrease parental stress and the likelihood of child abuse. And then with the support of philanthropy, we were able to go even further to put dollars and cents to that statistic and find the savings that the FRCs provided for that county, as well as we looked at an urban county in a much more diverse community in California and found even bigger savings because, of course, urban services are more expensive. But I would argue the dollars and cents are important, but the most important savings are the human cost savings. All those children and families who will not be swept up into a system that no family wants to have anything to do with. And once you're part of, you may never get out of. Family resource centers provide a strong, clear alternative. This data also is about the statistically significant improvements that families demonstrated by participating in family resource centers, including economic health, self-sufficiency, health, social support, caregiver child nurturing attachment, all good things. And this data comes from England, where they invested in these centers and found that children who participated in the centers with their families from 0 to 5, they tracked them longitudinally and saw that that they continued to have that they had educational achievements that were increased, lasting until the age of 16, long after their families were no longer participating in the centers, and that the positive effects were 6 times higher for families and children with the lowest incomes. So this also shows how incredibly effective these centers can be with supporting communities. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here, and we'll just ask a question here that you can answer in the chat, and then you can also, you can answer in the chat. You can type your questions there, which we'll be capturing and addressing later after Bhavani shares her presentation. But this little cutie is inviting us to buzz about the information that was just shared to understand what resonates most with you, and what would you be interested to explore more. So please type your comments and thoughts and questions into the chat, and we will be glad to have further conversation and discussion about them shortly. And there's my contact information, and turning things over to Bhavani. Thank you so very much.
Do I take it over from here? Yes, okay. So no questions in between. I feel like I'm talking to an empty screen, getting used to a Zoom call. Hello, everyone. Bhavani Pillai here. So as you all know, I'm from Singapore, a third generation Indian. So my great-grandparents actually migrated from India. So dad side's from Kerala, mom side's from Tamil Nadu. I speak Tamil. As you all know, Singapore is multiracial. So we do serve different cultures, predominantly Chinese, Malay, Indians. Even Indians, even within each culture group, it's very diverse. Like there's different dialect groups, different languages. So yes, that's really a melting pot of cultures that we come from. Today's presentation, let me just get to sharing screen. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to be sharing from the perspective of what I know or where I'm situated at, which is a family service center. So I know, Andrew has been talking about FRCs. In Singapore, we call them FSC, just a little slight difference in the acronym. A family service center is something that's been set up in Singapore for more than about 20, 30 years. So where I'm at, it's called Kampong Kapor Community Services. And this FSC has been around since 1992, right? So it's a preview into the landscape that I am familiar with. So what are FSCs? Very similar to what Andrew has shared. It's community-based. It is meant to provide support to anyone and everyone, really across income groups, across nationality, across ethnic, racial, yes. But at the same time, there is an emphasis on the vulnerable individuals because these are families that fall through the gaps that we want to target. And FSCs are run by social work practitioners. So we generally, most of the practitioners are social work trained or they are counseling trained. So that's our background. And we don't do it alone. So it is an ecosystem of care that we come from. We partner with other agencies to coordinate services. So while FSCs are the front line, almost like the one-stop touch point for many families who get referred to us, we don't do everything, even though we see anyone and everyone. So we see family violence, caregiving support, parenting issues, mental health issues. But at the same time, we also know that there are specialized services or other programs that we refer families to. So our services include information and referral, which is our intake. I think it's probably a familiar process anywhere across, where you start with your triage process, right? Where we find out, what do families need? What is the presenting issue? Also, what's the underlying issues? So they may come in saying that I don't have money, but, underlying the financial issues could be a whole host of other issues like social isolation, or maybe not knowing certain resources in the community, or unemployment issues. So those are the gaps that we identify before deciding where we refer them to, or if we take them on as a case. And when we say casework and counseling, that's the bulk of the service that we do, which is working closely with families. We do home visits. They also come to our center. Sometimes we meet at the nearby neighborhood. And we journey with families from the start till the end with certain working goals in mind. And these working goals are usually, they're decided upon collaboratively with the families. So we say, okay, you've come here, saying that you want to be a better parent. What does that look like? How can we help you, get there? And then we set milestones with the families. Sometimes working goals, or, the journey can be as short as 2 months. It could be a very simple request. I just need you to link me to this person. That's it. Or sometimes, the journey could take much longer. And I've seen families journey with us across 2 generations. Like, I know the parents and then the children are also clients. And it's not about whether it's better or worse, but sometimes some chronic issues just need a little bit more hand-holding. And the relationships that they form with the workers in the family is what holds them through. So we see ourselves as embedded as part of the community. There's also group work, community work. This is how we organize it in Singapore, but I'm sure there's many different ways to do it. It's just how we categorize it, casework, group work, com work. The idea is we work with individuals collectively in a group and also as a community. Very similar to also what Andrew said, because I think there's so many commonalities with the idea of FRC or working with families, because we do this with a family systems lens. And in a family systems lens, we do see them, individuals in context of the families that they come with, which means that we use things like a family tree diagram or a genogram to see, locate, who are your siblings, who are your families, where did your parents come from, what sort of values and beliefs, do you have growing up, what sort of experiences did you have as a child that informed you as a parent. So those are the kind of questions that we ask during counseling or casework to help us form a better picture of the person in the environment, the people that come to us. And an ecological perspective is also having a really good understanding of the community resources. FSCs are located geographically, which means that we only serve clients within a certain neighborhood. So for Kampong Kapo Family Service Center, where I come from, we serve the Jalan Besar Toa Payoh neighborhood, which is I don't know how to say it. It's probably in total we serve about 400 to 500 families. So that's the breadth of the families that we serve, or the volume of the families that we serve. And they live within the neighborhood, and our particular community has a higher representation or concentration of rental flats. So rental flats are subsidized government housing that's meant for the lowest income, which means they pay less than, let's say, $10 for housing. So that means that their per capita income is probably very low, less than 2,000 per family. So that falls within the poverty. We don't have a poverty line in Singapore, but this is really capturing the lowest, the families that really are struggling economically. So that's actually the focus or the type of population that we serve within our particular FSC. There are other FSCs across Singapore, and their profiles may be slightly different. And we also use a strengths and community-centric lens. I say that this is really important because very often when families come to us, we see what's wrong And recently, I've a friend told me this. She was like, let's start with what's wrong and not with what's wrong. And I really like that because it stuck. I'm like, because what's working for them to have survived all these years before they got to know us. And I keep reminding ourselves that we are part of their community. We're not the only. We cannot remove existing organic resources and relationships that they already have in their lives. So we always come in from that lens that we want to contribute, add on to, rather than, subtract. So that's why the community-centric lens is something that we hold very, very strongly in the work that we do. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. Social workers are not miracle workers. We cannot solve every problem. Yeah. So this is the KKCS mission. It looks like every mission, it's very broad, but generically, it is to promote and improve well-being of individuals of every stage of life. So in this sense, what you see is it is really broad. And when people ask, what do you do in FSC? I find it very hard to answer because it'll be easier to answer what we don't do. Because we're so broad, and that in itself is actually a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it is a wide catchment. We ensure that nobody, gets turned away. There's no wrong door. But at the same time, when you don't specialize in one thing, it is very easy to get lost in the details. We have workers who are generalist, and they toggle between many different needs. But it's hard to build depth or to specialize, which is why we refer out. So this is a snapshot of our impact as of this year. We just released our annual report. So we've supported 1,029 families. So I mentioned we support at KKFSC, the FSC that I run, that's about 400 to 500 families. But KKCS, which is the community services, the umbrella or the organization that I work under, we have 2 FSCs under us, 2 family service centers, which is why the number of families are much bigger. Because it's 2 different neighborhoods. 22 families with children preserved. I'll come to this later when I talk about the program that we run, which is about preserving children in the community. And then we have 416 children participated, who supported through these programs, and 369 marriages supported. So this is a snapshot of the services that are under KKCS, which is the Kampong Kapo Community Services. It started with Kampong Kapo Family Service Center, the one that I'm situated at. This was almost the flagship. So 1991, we were set up, and that was formally set up. But actually in 1979, it was a homework center run by a church nearby. So that was the origin story of KKFSC. It was run by a group of volunteers who wanted to help children from low-income families read. It began as a homework center that, slowly evolved into a family service center in 1991. And that's why it was affiliated to the church. And then in 2018, so you notice for a good more than 10 years, we existed as one center, and there was never a need to grow to scale. But somehow over just the past 5 to 10 years, there has been quite concentrated growth. Also because of the way that our sector has been evolving, there's been a lot more resources being pumped into looking at specific needs, which is why we've developed in that direction as well. So 2018, our second family service center was set up in Whampoa, which is another neighborhood. And then at the same year, there's a program called Safe and Strong Families Preservation that was set up. So this program is actually a pilot program that was run by the ministry to look at child protection concerns. So how do we support children that would otherwise be removed by the state to be supported to remain within the family, but then they provide intensive home-based intervention to help families build up their capability to support children. Because most often parents who abuse their children don't want to abuse their children. I mean, I'm saying most of them, I'm not saying all, but most parents come from a place of good intentions. But their capacity is limited due to experiences, their upbringing, or whatever it might be. So we understand that and realize that if you look at even trauma, where does trauma come from? Can we increase the capacity of parents to be able to support children within the community? Because we recognize that it's more traumatic to remove children and put them out of home care. That's where this program was born, to see, what sort of resources do we need to pump into each family to ensure that children can remain. So that was a program that started in 2018, and we still continue. It's not a program that has scaled, which is why if you look at the previous slide, it's 22 families preserved in 1 year. So it's a very small scaled program, but it's very intensive. We're looking at, 1 to 2 times a week kind of intensity with these families. In 2022, there was a volunteer center set up. This is basically to broker relationships in the community between the nonprofit and also corporates, because this is when CSRs became a big thing. People in corporates wanted to be part of the community and said, how can I help? Besides giving donation, I want to have a community day. I want to come and, be part of giving back. So volunteer centers were set up in different regions to coordinate and also be the bridge between corporates and charities. And then in 2022, there was also FAM. This was a nationwide thing, so it's not just within our region in KKCS, but across Singapore. FAM centers were set up to look at purely marital needs. But this was also because of a shift in policy around marriages. Couples who went through divorce are mandated to go through counseling before their divorce is granted in court, especially couples with children. So the mandated counseling, these were the centers that ran those counseling programs to look at, the impact of divorce on children, so that parents are equipped with the skills to co-parent, regardless of the kind of, acrimonious, what do you call it? Acrimonious, thank you. Acrimonious, divorces that happen in families. So that's FAM. And then 2023, there's Kickstart, which is also empowering lower income families with their children who are below 7 years old, so preschool kids. This idea was so that we can be upstream and really target at parents to support the education and also social-emotional learning of children in these families. And then in 2024, family development team. So I won't go into detail, but you can see how really, it's proliferated into different services to look at a bit more targeted, a bit more specialized programs. Because like I said, a family service center does everything and anything. But in order to go deep, we do need resources to really drive in those outcomes. And that's what we've seen in terms of our own evolution as a community service center. Building on that, so these are our programs that are run by the different services. There's Bright. Save Me is a group work program that is based on protective behaviors. I don't know whether any of you are familiar with protective behaviors. It's the idea of good touch, bad touch, helping children understand what's safe, what's not safe, helping them identify as a safe adult in their lives so that we can look upstream and prevent child sexual abuse or for children to feel safe in communities. So that's a program that we partner with the schools in our neighborhood, and we run that. The Empowered Families Initiative is another asset-based model where families support one another to achieve their goals. Kasih Sayang, which is a Malay word for giving back, gift of love, actually. It's a program that we are quite proud of within our FSC because it's community-based and it's entirely run by the residents in our community. In fact, okay, maybe I'll go to the next slide. There's a story on it. Yeah. So in fact, Kasih Sayang started off during COVID because we were looking for ways to increase access to better quality or nutritious food that was affordable for lower income families. A lot of the food rations that we give to the families were canned food or, instant noodles, which are, we know it's not healthy. And families who wanted to cook, oftentimes when, you look at fresh food, it was actually more expensive than junk food. So we wanted to see, we got a a fridge in our FSC, and then we were looking for donors and volunteers to come and drive this. So this was back in 2018. And I remember this because that was a time that I was still at the FSC as well. And during COVID, we didn't do much marketing at all. Not many people knew about us, but we had, set up the fridge. And then mother and a daughter duo heard about us through a nearby soup kitchen. And interestingly, this mother-daughter duo were Indian nationals who had just moved from India to Singapore and were looking to be connected to the community, and they were looking for ways to give back. So they found out about us, came, spoke to us and said that, hey, I know you haven't really set up a system about getting the groceries. Let us handle that for you. So they totally took initiative, took it offline, found their own suppliers for the groceries. And for the past close to 5 years, they've been doing this on their own. And it's amazing because they want to be anonymous. They don't want their names to be credited. They don't want their photos to be taken. And it shows the generosity really of people in the community who just want to give back because they see value in it, and they also see the community benefiting from it. So in addition to the donors, we also have volunteers, and these volunteers are either our clients or residents. Another interesting thing about our community is we have a lot of transnational families. So women, for example, from Indonesia, Thailand, or even Burma. So they marry Singaporeans, and sometimes the age difference is much. It's a very big age difference. So you get young wives with much older men, and they marry young and they come into Singapore without any social connections. And oftentimes, especially if they don't speak English, they are very much isolated. So we found that there was a group of Indonesian mothers who couldn't work because they didn't have work permit, and they were on long-term visit pass. So they were known to our center. We introduced them together, and somehow I think it was the concept of being able to offer food that really resonated with this group of moms. So they took ownership of it, and every week, twice a week, they come and they take ownership of the whole process of distributing the food. And through that, they've made friends in the community. So it's just a small example of how, these initiatives gives a sense of ownership, a sense of pride for otherwise residents who may feel socially isolated or disconnected. Yep. So we call this the kampong spirit. It's very similar to the village spirit, or the idea that we are all one big family. Unfortunately, I think with the way globalization or work or just how our lives have been, it's led us to maybe prioritize independence, prioritize speed over connections. And being in an FSC has taught me that sometimes slowing down, just having small chats, checking in with people, saying, hey, how are you? I haven't seen you for 2 weeks. These kind of conversations actually help people feel seen and heard. And those are really priceless connections that FSCs can be a platform for. So these are just some pictures of who we are. This is our team in the entire organization, not just the FSC, but KKCS. We're about we're 100 right now. So we're 100 teams strong. This is how it looks like. We have roadshows in the community where we speak to people about volunteering. This is an example of a support group within one of our centers where residents can come together and talk about, what's important to them. These are children who come for after-school programs. This is the Kickstart team. This is a very interesting, this is something that I'm really quite proud of. So we did Kampung Chio, which was a community initiative last year that brought together talents in our Jalan Besar community to put up almost like a talent time. So we had residents who we didn't know were amazing singers. They came and sang. There were people who danced. There were people who said, okay, I'm going to MC or, for this event. So it was a nice opportunity for us to see our clients, our residents come together and put on something that we all can be proud of. It wasn't about being good or the best, but it was just about celebrating the many strengths that we have in our community. And yeah, it's not always you know, what would I say? It's not always very clean and orderly. Sometimes it's chaotic, sometimes it's messy. The work does get very difficult, which I'm sure all of us are familiar with. But there's also a sense of fulfillment, I think, at the end of the day. So with that, thank you. If there's any questions, I'll be more than happy, because I really don't know what resonates or where each of you are coming from. So it will be more helpful, I think, to hear from you in terms of what you would like to hear more from us.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much, Bhavani and Andrews. I hope I'm audible now.
Yes.
Thank you. So it was really, really wonderful. I think we can just keep the floor open for the questions. I know we have received a lot of information, very interesting concept and very interesting services that you have shared in the examples, how family resource centers can be a very useful and a very, bringing all the communities together to support each other. So we have received a few questions during the registration also. And few questions I know we can just take it up. So I would just ask for one question. I think it is addressed to both of you, whoever wants to address it. And then we can just open the floor open for question and answer. People can just unmute themselves and I can ask. But just one request, keep the question a little brief so that others also get the chance to ask their question. So particularly this question comes from Mr. Manoranjan, and he wanted to understand how you measure outcome demonstrate the long-term impact of FRCs on reducing child maltreatment, improving family economic stability, and enhancing children's development achievement. So, I'm opening this question to both the speakers.
I'll just answer broadly, and Bhavani, feel free to share at your program, your organization, how you might do this. But the programs are all measuring their work with families and are accountable to their funders. And by the way, typically government. So around the world, typically the services are funded 50% to 100% by government. And there are certain measures and expectations that the programs are expected to meet. So that all happens, and then the funders analyze and use that data and track progress. But then also we have these external evaluations, the independent research that's been done in different countries, and that's all on the website. And so I point you to that to see the detailed methodology that's in all those reports done by excellent researchers that can share more detail about that.
I think to add on, it is true. A lot of the outcome indicators are set by our funders, which is the government. But at the same time, we ask ourselves, as practitioners, what do we think is important, or how would we measure the effectiveness of the work that we do? So the way I see it is there's output, which is the measurable, the very tangible things like the number of families served, the number of cases closed, whether things were met within a timeline. So those are the very measurable indicators. And then there's outcome, whether how many families, for example, how many children remain within the homes instead of being removed, or how many children's attendance have improved in schools, or how many so those are outcome indicators that helps us to measure certain issues that we are targeting. But then there's also impact. And I feel that that's the part that we haven't really gotten to, which is the experience of help seeking of the clients that we serve. How do they feel connected to the families, to the community centers, the FSCs that are there? So I believe that relationship is what fuels the connection, but we haven't really found a way to measure that as of yet. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Bhavani. I think there is another question is also related to. It's similar to the question that I've just asked. So this person has put up this question, just giving the context of the question: the use of evidence on social return on investment for mobilizing resources for FRC. Idea especially comes from corporate foundations other those who rely on return on investment proof. So the question is, what indicators do they use to measure social returns? Could they provide us any example, if you could provide, of this?
The answer from my end is going to be the same as before. Is that all detailed methodologies in the reports?
Hmm.
And I
think
want to
some.
say, oh, sorry, go ahead, Bhavani.
No, please finish. Yeah.
I was just going to say that that research is also all summarized on that double-sided handout that we put in the chat and was sent out before this webinar, the FRC overview. And we find that that is very, very helpful for making the case and explaining the value of FRCs to different stakeholders, be they in philanthropy or government, local government, state government, national government, because the data is there, and summarizing it, and it's very clear. And that has been very helpful in terms of building support for these programs. We find that whether elected officials, government representatives, they can see the value because you put it in dollars and cents and show the difference it makes. Again, these are not expensive programs, and they produce wonderful results that families love and that save the government and our society a lot of money and trouble, right? So the case is very strong that can be made using that data.
I think to add to that, because a lot of our services are funded by the government, we haven't had to articulate, in that sense, a theory of change or have very clear logic models that help to articulate outcomes because there's only one funder. But increasingly, because if you notice, there are now many, many other programs that have different sets of funders. So that has also pushed us to look at how can we be more concrete about, articulating impact outcomes. And we find that that's usually easier with programs that are specific. So for example, we run Bright, which is for children between the age of 5 to 8 to look at socio-emotional learning. So that's very concrete outcomes that we can track that helps us to then bring back to the funders and say, look, this works. But at the same time, at a FSC, because we're doing so many things, it's a bit hard to choose outcomes that, that say that this works because there's so many different variables, which is why I find that, with funders that are corporate or maybe come from a non-government, programs that are a lot more defined are more useful.
Thank you, Bhavani. There is another question from Paulumi. Paulumi, can you hear me? And if you would like to unmute yourself and ask the question, or do you want me to read your question to them?
Yeah, so my question, thank you. So my question is related to the challenges um, uh, you experience while operational or programmatic challenges in running the FRC or FSCs.
Where do we start? Maybe, Paulumi, you want to share about the challenges that you face on the ground, and I'll see whether that resonates.
So basically, we do not, it's very interesting. First, both the presentations are extremely useful. But we do not run. So I'm from Terry Homes Foundation. We do not run, but definitely we see a huge scope in terms of offering parenting services because that's a area we want to include in our strategy. So that's why I'm keen to understand the challenges and particularly looking the complexities of in the migrant communities because there are migrant communities from various states. And I'm sure in the area where you are running the family service centers, it's the similar challenges also maybe you are experiencing. The languages might be different, culture, food, everything. So how do you kind of manage that? What are the strategies you take to overcome this challenge?
Thank you. I think that helps to narrow it or funnel it to how do we reach out to certain population groups that really is quite disconnected from our our experience. So yes, increasingly we've seen migrant communities who speak languages that we don't within our team. So our team, yes, the main language groups are covered, Tamil, Malay, Chinese, but you have dialects. Recently we had a referral and it was a Bengali couple and none of us spoke Bengali. And I was looking very hard to find translators, and it's not the same when you do a Google Translate, right? So those are real challenges, and sometimes the best that we can do is look to the community or to ask the families, do you have a friend who can come along with you to can help us to translate, or to look at who is within their own networks, and if their networks are not strong, which most of the time it is not strong, that's why they need help. We then need to partner with translators or other migrant communities that we can tap on. Yeah, so that's in terms of languages, but also, the idea of building our capacity for cross-cultural work has been ongoing in terms of, understanding how different cultures, what they value, and also coming in as a position of not being an expert, but really wanting to learn from the families, because we're really not experts in their lives, and that's a position that we hold very strongly.
Yeah, this is very helpful because this is a kind of question always comes to our mind while designing the intervention, because even the cultural, because parenting is so cultural kind of, there's so many norms and beliefs and practices involved, and each community, they have their own practice and these kind of beliefs. So how, in a mixed community, how kind of the services can be designed so that different cultural and keeping different culture and context in mind. So it is extremely useful. Thank you for your information.
Thank you, Paulami, for your question. There is actually two questions from Mayuri Sushma. Mayuri, would you like to ask your question or do you want me to read it?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay, so Mayuri has two questions. So one is how the government involvement is there in these kind of programs in FRCs, and has any of you or the centers that you have visited or observed handled addiction cases in parents, addiction in parents? So any reflection on that?
Do you want to go ahead, Bo?
Yeah, no, I was going to say that definitely we've seen addiction issues come up, whether it's drug abuse or alcohol addiction. Definitely those have come up. In terms of what's our learning, I think personally, my learning is to acknowledge what I don't know when it comes to addictions, because it is an entire set of knowledge and training that's needed to work with addictions. So I see myself as a family intervention expert, but I'm not an expert in addictions. So if there is a clear addiction issue, I will usually refer that person out. But we are working with the family, so it's about the relationships. How are the relationships in the families affected by this addiction issue? That's where we enter, and that's where we have conversations with families to help them heal, to help them figure out a way of coping that is better than what's happening right now. But if it's about purely addressing the addictions, we usually do refer them out to specialists.
Thank you, Bhavani. Andrew, if you could just throw some reflection on the question on government involvement in FRCs.
Yeah, I put in the chat as well. The government's role would be funding and monitoring the programs, also making referrals of families to the program. So, for example, that child protection staff at the government know about these centers and make referrals to them before they open cases and drastically change a family's life, that they point them to these community resources first, as needed. And also governments promote the centers, so they have campaigns and such. Also, as they roll out new programs or benefits, that the centers are a wonderful way to get the word out to the community. So they may partner with them to launch new schemes and programs that then the centers that have those trusted relationships with families can help get the word out and educate families about these new programs and schemes.
I think this is very interesting if the government also collaborate for such FRC, for such services as well. There is another question from Aparpita, and her question is, what can be the physical or logistical constraints in setting up and running an FSC or FRC in an overcrowded city like Delhi or other cities, towns in lower middle income group or countries?
Yes, well,
Maybe I. Mm.
you first. Sorry.
Go ahead.
First.
Now, I was going to say that just to share where we are located, because Singapore is pretty crowded. We really don't have space and we're so small. So our FSC is located in a rental flat. So our clients are our neighbors, literally. So we're on the third floor of a rental flat. So we take up the units on a third floor public housing block. And that, yeah. So I guess finding ways to creatively use community spaces so that we don't need to be a part, but we can be part of the landscape is one way.
And I would build on that to say this is where we also have to look at the systemic level. So, for example, the role of government or funders in thinking it's not just about one center for a huge urban area. It's about how do we have a network of centers that can address the diverse needs and provide that universal access or coverage that we talked about. So I shared about in New Jersey how that looks like 57 centers across 21 counties. In the city of San Francisco, to use an urban example, they have 26 centers. So 26 centers just in one city with a population that you'll think is so tiny it could fit on the head of a pin compared to an Indian city. But that said, 26 centers within this city that every neighborhood has a center. And then also they have 4 centers that serve population specific citywide. So one for supporting homeless families, one supporting children of families with disabilities, one for LGBTQ families, and one for, I always forget the last one. I will remember it. I'll put it in the chat. But anyway, that's really good planning. That's an example of really good planning where you ensure that, teen parents, supporting parents of teens, parents who are teens. So that's a really good example of very thoughtful coverage, to ensure that everyone has access, both specialized services and the universal access. So that's what you'd hope for, that there isn't inordinate pressure on one particular center. Bhavani shared how many centers there are in Singapore. I just came back from Hong Kong. Hong Kong has 67 centers. So 67 centers, again, a very urban, diverse area. And they're located in different settings. Some are located like within a big housing development, and all the families in that housing development know that's the place to go for supports and services. And so every major housing development would have this kind of center. And then you'd have ones that are also in other kinds of locations in the community. So these are just some examples that go to that systemic planning piece to ensure universal access.
Actually, just to add on, I remembered there could also be mobile teams. So, within the FSC, we have 3 different teams, and each team can co-locate at a different space. So, for example, we are good friends with the neighborhood police. There are certain intake and referrals that we co-locate and do it at the police station. We could co-locate at the nearby school. So, finding partners and co-locating mobile teams could be another way around it.
That's very interesting to have mobile service centers also. I think there is one question from Umesh Prohiji. Sir, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yes, you can read this also.
Thank you.
Problem. Yeah.
So I would just club two or three questions which are of similar things. So one question which Umeshi has raised is there specialized people to handle abuse, exploitation of children issues where the family seeks such support or open off? The other one, then it's a similar. So what are the services for engagement with adolescents and adolescent issues that you see? And again, how the children with disabilities are addressed in such family resource centers?
I can take the one about protecting the vulnerable, especially about abuse. So we do have very organized trainings to prepare workers to take on these cases. In fact, the beginning of my career started at a family violence center. So The FSCs are generalist, but we also have protective organizations or centers across Singapore that specializes in working with either survivors of abuse or persons who abuse. And they get referrals either voluntarily or referrals from the court, either mandated through the personal protection order or through the police. Yeah, so there is clear training and pathways to equip workers to handle these cases.
I would also add that when parents come to centers, when families come to centers, they're also informed that in many countries, the staff are what are called mandated reporters. So then if there are issues of abuse that are disclosed, then the staff have a legal responsibility to make reports. But I will tell you from my experience running centers, for example, the last center where I was at for 3.5 years, during that 3.5 years, we made one call. Just one. Because with the building of trusting relationships with families, again, we're there to support them with resources and things that they need, that it doesn't rise to that level. And when we had to make a referral, we did it with the family. So we're sitting with the family, telling them, we need to make this call and hope that you'll get some additional supports beyond what we can provide, but we're going to be there to support you with it. So we're not telling on you that you're going to, trying to get you in trouble. We recognize, this is a critical period and you need additional supports. So that whole framing also changes the experience of a family connecting with the child protection system. As to the question about families of children with disabilities, so first of all, families of all socioeconomic backgrounds may have children with disabilities, right? So that covers everybody. So any center typically would again have some basic training, like Bhavani has mentioned, know and to recognize, first of all, like just even identify, like they may have early screening or suggestions for families saying like, oh, you know what, I'm noticing this, and maybe you want to have your child be tested or observed or such, right? So they're on the front lines of early identification of potential challenges, and that can really help because then children can get plugged into supports and services that will help them. So all family resource centers have with a basic knowledge. Same thing as they have a basic knowledge of mental health issues and substance abuse issues and other things that they can identify and then make referrals as needed. But then also there are specialized centers and programs set up specifically for families of children with disabilities. Now, part of that is because, again, based on research, we know that the levels of parental stress are higher in families of children with disabilities. So providing that support is really important. Those centers that I referenced in California, they are typically run by the staff themselves are families of children with disabilities. So they deeply understand the struggles, the challenges, and the stresses, and that peer-to-peer support is invaluable for helping those families to know they're not alone. And my family is managing through this, and we can support you to do that as well.
I think this is very encouraging that people who understand and families, parents who have children or have been dealing with children with disabilities are also part of the family resource centers. And I think one of the important understanding what I have been building with this conversation is you need to have trained staff. You need to constantly build upon the capacities of the people who are part of this family resource center to deal with multiple issues. Like in India, if we talk about, we also need to think about what the law says, like in the question of what Umeshji was trying to ask. When you talk about protection, here especially of sexual abuse cases, the centers have a mandatory responsibility. You have to report it irrespective of whether the family is willing to report the matter, take the matter to the legal. So these are also nuances that one has to make sure that when the staff is there, they understand what kind of a challenges that they might face, and how we also bring in families and empower them to go and report themselves rather than we just do anything without their consent and without giving them the knowledge about what are our, and also bringing our own responsibilities when we run a center like this. So this is very important. I think we are almost coming to an end, but there is one last question from Ranjana ma'am. Ma'am, if you would like to ask your question, and then we'll just close it because we don't want to keep everyone waiting.
Thank you, Kavita and Bhavani and Andrew. Great presentation, lot of learning from today's session. I just have a question. I think, Kavita, in fact, I feel ki directly or indirectly the answer has been given here, also shared also. But just I am sharing like this is such a wonderful initiative. And then Bhavani, as you also shared that the it has been integrated into the system also. So it just again focusing like what's the government call on this scaling up this model all over Singapore. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Over to you, Bhavani.
Wait, so scaling in terms of the number of centers?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay. So currently there are about 48 FSCs in Singapore. So I think we're at a stage where it's not about scaling, but about consolidation. There was a point where there weren't too many, but now every neighborhood has FSC. But the challenge or the issue that we are facing now is how do we coordinate services? How do we ensure some level of standardization or quality across the different FSCs? So that's where we're at. Not exactly scaling, but about coordination, collaboration.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bhavani. Thank you. And I think it has been a wonderful, wonderful experience. And exploring this concept with all of you is also enriching that during the conversation, we also got to learn that there are some centers which are not completely what we've learned about FRC today, but similar to what FRC is. And what I've realized is it's important that we document and we learn more about those centers. So I know there are people like Devashish has shared about the centers, then Shilpaji has shared about such centers. This is the I am when we were talking about why we talk about rehabilitation of children, we're talking about restoring children back to their families. We often grapple with this question: ki how we can support families together. So we are not saying if family resource center in the Indian context is the only solution. Maybe we can look it as one of the solutions, and we have to come up with new, more innovative solutions to support families and strengthen and ensure that there is no reinstitutionalization of children. So I think in this direction, as ISCN is always there to promote family-based care, and I can see Dr. Nilima Mehta ma'am has also joined us. She's one of our steering committee member and had been a very, very amazing guiding factor for me when I joined ISCN. I think this is like the first step for ISCN, and I'm very happy that Sandhya and Ranjana had been part of this whole planning how we should have this, learning event and then bring it and take it forward as well. So today is just the beginning of this discussion. And we are also inviting all of you who have joined us today, who have shared the resources, talk about other centers which are existing in India, what we heard about in UP, what we heard about in Kerala in the chat during the chat will collate, and we might just come back to you all and see how we can take it forward. Is there a scope for us to initiate or like a pilot one sort of center here with the collaboration, as Bhavani just mentioned? Sometimes just opening too many is also not the solution. It's rather how you coordinate with different services. And can we all come together on one platform and discuss it further? So what the next step that I wanted to share with everyone, we really want to have more people who are interested. Please come with us, and we will have a physical discussion about it in a more close group who are willing to take this forward and see if as a pilot work, whether it is working in the Indian context, how in the Indian context, what kind of a changes we would like to introduce, what kind of a modification we would like to introduce, so that we see where we go from here, and then supporting families and strengthening them. And I hope with Andrew and with Bhavani's support, we'll be getting constant guidance how it is being done in different parts of the world, and sharing with us the different example, like what we heard about the Singapore example today, maybe some other examples from Africa. I remember when we met Andrew, we also spoke about the examples in Japan, in China, in Africa. So I think this can be one of the solutions for us to at least ensure that the families are getting the support and they are not feeling helpless and hopeless that the children are coming back and there is no other kind of institution which are not CCIs, but we have been talking about it, like the hostels which are coming, and then the children are going back again to other kinds of institutions. So with that note, I am inviting everyone to please let us know if you're interested. We'll reach out to you again for a more deeper discussion on it on a physical level. I know it was an online meeting, but we plan another meeting, in-person meeting, probably in another 5-6 months will come when Andrew will visit India, and then we'll have that meeting with everyone. So thank you again. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Bhavani, for the wonderful presentation and for so patiently giving answers to all the questions. I know there could be many other questions people would have, but please feel free to write to us. We'll put that question to Ms. Bhavani and to Andrew for their responses. We'll share the presentations as well and the recording for those who could not join for any other emergencies or for any other reason. And thank you, Ranjana and Sandhya, for being with me during the planning of this event. And thank you again for joining us today.